Last operational assignment was as commander for the NATO Joint Force Command Naples Commander in the United States Naval Forces Europe. A warm welcome, please, for Admiral Mike Mullen.
Well, good evening again, and thanks, Craig Yoshida, for what you're doing. Certainly, your story about coming in July and at least having thoughts of going somewhere else and being consumed by the people of Houston, it's pretty easy to see why. And so I'd really like to express my gratitude for all in the local community here who made this event possible. There are many distinguished individuals here tonight. The Lieutenant Governor, former Secretary Mineta, former Speaker Wright, and others, and many others. And that just speaks to the significance of not just the event, but the men that we honor tonight. So it really is a distinct privilege to be with you, and I'm honored to be among some of the finest American heroes this country has ever known. The gentlemen of the 141st, the 405th, and the 442nd. Last month, I shared a ceremony with some of your compatriots on the shores of Normandy, and I remain deeply moved and impressed by the sacrifices of that generation. As you probably all are already aware, but I will repeat for my own benefit, really, to help the magnitude of their sacrifices sink in. The 442nd, for its size and length of service, is the most decorated unit in the entire history of the United States military. The original 4,000 men had to be replaced nearly 3.5 times. In total, about 14,000 men served in the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, ultimately earning 9,486 Purple Hearts, 21 Medals of Honor, and an unprecedented 8 Presidential Unit citations. 65 years ago in the mountains of France, their grit and sacrifices wrote a brilliant chapter in American military history. And I'm truly humbled in the deepest sense possible to be in their midst, to share with you some of the many lessons I've learned from their intrepid service. Their story has taught me so many things and has likely inspired all who have heard it. There's so very much that I believe every person in the world can learn that certainly cannot be overstated. For starters, we should study deeply their inspiration. What motivated these young men? Was it a sense of duty, a willingness to serve something larger than themselves, a desire to do their part to defend the American homeland? For the Japanese-American soldiers, known as Nisei, it was all of this and a great deal more. Senator Dan Inouye, himself a World War II veteran of the 442nd, said that on the morning of December 7th, 1941, he felt that his life had come to an end because, quote, obviously the pilot in that plane looked like me, and I wasn't quite certain what the future held for us, end quote. And as Korean-American Colonel Young Kim, an officer of the 442nd, described it, quote, we had to do well or things were going to be terrible, end quote. Joe Hattori, a Nisei from my part of the country, Los Angeles, relayed that when he enlisted, his older brother told him, quote, don't disgrace the family name and reputation, end quote. As you know, in Japanese culture, dishonor onto the family is simply unthinkable. And in the case of the Japanese American Regiment, it was a powerful motivator to do well, to never let your buddies down. So it was out of an innate sense of pride and courage and a heartfelt belief in the liberties promised by the United States Constitution. These Japanese Americans nobly volunteered to serve the very country who persecuted and imprisoned them and their families. Yet these Japanese Americans who chose to serve felt not only a deep sense of patriotism, but they also felt that they had to prove their patriotism, their loyalty to a then ungrateful nation. Much can certainly be said about the rich heritage of Japanese warrior culture, Bushido, in English, the military knight ways. The code of the ancient samurai was thoroughly imbued with the spirit of self-sacrifice. In a way, the men of the 442nd were the accidental Bushi, drawn not from the elite and the privileged, but from the abused and the displaced. They were and are, however, men of the noblest hearts and the greatest courage, and the keepers of a steadfast commitment to their families, their American brothers in arms, and their common country, America. Much can also be said about the men of the 141st, the Alamo Regiment formed from the Texas National Guard. Although Texans have a much shorter history than the Japanese for sure, but don't tell them that, Texans are sort of America's knights, our quintessential freedom fighters, our loud and big-hearted, courageous souls, people whom everywhere I go strike me as the very proudest of the land of the free and the home of the brave. The Alamo Regiment was the first American regiment to set foot on European soil. And prior to that fateful October in 1944, they had distinguished themselves in battle in North Africa and Italy. They saw themselves as the guardians of the Alamo legacy, a symbol of American freedom and independence. But being an expert on neither Japanese nor Texas heritage, for that matter,